Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're looking at the story that has everyone buzzing. The hacking of US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's computer.
Big story.
Yeah, we've been poring over a ton of news articles and reports, and let me tell you, this is way more than your typical data breach.
Oh, for sure.
This is high-stakes stuff, folks. We're talking international intrigue, potential vulnerabilities in seemingly secure systems.
Absolutely, and what's really blown me away is the sheer scale of it. Initially, it seemed like a single computer was compromised.
Right, just Yellen's computer.
But it's way bigger than that. Turns out, over 400 Treasury systems might have been affected.
400.
400. Thousands of documents potentially compromised.
Thousands. Seriously?
Yeah, a far cry from the initial reports. Makes you wonder what they were really after.
That's what I was thinking. What exactly were these hackers targeting? I mean, was it just random chaos? Or was there a specific goal in mind? Well, that's where it gets interesting. Reports suggest they were zeroing in on specific information about sanctions and international affairs.
Sanctions and international affairs, huh? That's not your typical steal your credit card number type of hack.
No, not at all. This is high-level stuff. And this is where things get even more interesting when you think about the whole U.S.-China dynamic.
Right, attention there.
Exactly. All that economic and strategic maneuvering between these two global powerhouses.
So this hack, if it is linked to China as some suspect, it could be a way for them to gain insights into U.S. strategy.
Potentially. Maybe even uncover pressure points or future plans. It's like digital espionage, if you will.
Espionage. Wow. So it wasn't just Yellen's computer then?
Nope. Other top Treasury officials were targeted too.
Really?
Yeah, which suggests they were trying to tap into a broader network of communication and information within the Treasury.
Makes you wonder how much they were able to access. We've heard whispers of law enforcement sensitive data being compromised.
Right, and that raises the stakes even higher.
What even is that, though? And why would hackers be interested in that kind of information?
That's a great question. Law enforcement sensitive data could include all sorts of things. Details about ongoing investigations, the identities of informants, even delicate diplomatic efforts. If that information fell into the wrong hands,
It could be disastrous.
exactly,
Yeah.
jeopardizing international relations, compromising active investigations, potentially even putting lives at risk.
Okay, so we've got international intrigue, potentially sensitive data at risk, a high-profile target.
Huh.
How did they even pull this off? I mean, the Treasury has got to have some pretty serious security measures in place, right?
You would think so.
Right.
But the reports we've seen indicate that they were able to exploit a vulnerability in BeyondTrust's remote support software.
BeyondTrust, that doesn't sound familiar.
It's essentially a digital help desk, allows IT professionals to access and fix computers remotely.
Oh, so like if my computer's acting up, they can just pop in virtually and fix it.
Precisely.
Interesting. So what was the flaw in this software? How did they get in?
Well, there was a digital master key called an API key that was accidentally left exposed.
Exposed?
Yes. And this key, it basically gave the hackers access to multiple offices within the Treasury, not just Yellen's computer.
It's like finding a skeleton key that unlocks every door in a building, so they had access to a lot more than they initially thought. Did they manage to completely shut down the Treasury systems? Was it total chaos?
Actually, it wasn't. The incident has been classified as major, but thankfully, critical systems like email and classified information remained secure.
Well, that's a relief. So the Treasury was targeted, but was Yellen's computer specifically targeted, or was she just caught in the larger net? What exactly did they get from her computer?
Reports are saying they accessed fewer than 50 unclassified files from her computer.
Unclassified files? Why bother with those? What could they possibly gain from unclassified information?
That's where things get really interesting. Imagine the hackers piecing together a profile of Yellen from seemingly innocuous details, who she emails frequently, what reports she accesses, even her daily schedule. This kind of open-source intelligence can be surprisingly revealing.
So it's not always about the top-secret files. Sometimes those everyday details can really paint a bigger picture.
Exactly. And those seemingly unimportant pieces of information can reveal a lot about someone's priorities, their communication style, even their network of contacts. It's all part of the puzzle.
So they breached the Treasury and accessed Yellen's computer. What was the response from the U.S.? Did they take any action against the perpetrators?
Well, there were briefings for Congress and staff about the incident, and the Treasury has been actively collaborating with the FBI CS, and other agencies to investigate the breach and hopefully prevent future incidents.
Makes sense. What about China? They've officially denied any involvement, haven't they? How seriously should we take that?
That's a tough question. Attributing cyber attacks can be incredibly difficult. It's a complex issue that intelligence analysts and diplomats are currently grappling with.
So we've got a major security breach with potentially sensitive data exposed, a software vulnerability that was exploited, and possible international implications. This is huge, but what does it all mean for the average person? Why should they care about a government hack that seems so far removed from their daily lives?
That's an excellent question, and it's one we should all be asking ourselves. This incident underscores just how sophisticated cyber attacks have become and how no one, not even high-ranking government officials, is immune.
So it's not just about government secrets and high-level intrigue. This kind of thing could happen to anyone.
Absolutely. Think about the software you use every day.
Yeah.
Your email, banking apps, social media accounts. They all rely on software that could have vulnerabilities. And as our reliance on technology continues to grow, the stakes just keep getting higher.
This is getting pretty real. But before we spiral into digital doomsday, let's take a moment to process this. When we come back, we'll delve into what this all means for you, what steps you can take to protect yourself, and explore what the future of cybersecurity might look like in a world where even the US Treasury can be hacked. Stay with us. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about this Treasury hack and how even though it was a big deal, it also really highlights the fact that we are all vulnerable. It's not just about government secrets anymore. It's about our own data and how to stay safe in a world that's increasingly online.
Exactly. It's easy to think about cyber attacks as these faraway events, but the truth is that they can affect anyone, anywhere. And the more we depend on technology, the more we need to understand those risks.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about those risks. Earlier, we mentioned law enforcement sensitive data. Can you give us some specific examples of that type of data? And if it's compromised, what could the real world consequences be?
Imagine this. Details about undercover operations get leaked, or the identities of informants are exposed. Think about the potential impact on ongoing investigations into organized crime or even terrorism. This kind of information in the wrong hands could have serious consequences.
It's a domino effect, right? You knock over one piece and it can trigger a whole chain of events.
Precisely. And it's not just law enforcement data either.
Yeah.
Sensitive diplomatic communications, trade negotiations, international agreements, all of this information is stored and transmitted electronically. It's a goldmine for hackers. And if it's compromised, it could lead to disrupted international relations, eroded trust between nations, and even possibly economic instability.
It's a lot to think about. So the stakes are obviously very high, and it feels like the bad guys are always a step ahead. What can we do to protect ourselves? I mean, I know about strong passwords and using multi-factor authentication, but is that enough? Is that really going to stop these sophisticated hackers?
Those are definitely important first steps. But it's also crucial to be aware of the threats, understand how these attacks happen, and develop a cybersecurity mindset. Think of it as a shift in perspective.
Okay, so tell me more about this cybersecurity mindset. What does that actually look like? How do we put that into practice?
It means thinking critically about the information you share online, being cautious about links you click, and questioning requests for personal information, especially when they seem suspicious.
So basically, don't just click on everything.
Right. Be skeptical. But it's also about keeping your software up to date, using strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts, and enabling multi-factor authentication wherever it's available.
Multi-factor authentication. A lot of people hear that and their eyes glaze over. Can you break it down a bit?
It's simpler than it sounds. Think of it as adding an extra layer of security. So instead of just typing in your password, you also might need to enter a code that's sent to your phone or use a fingerprint scan.
Oh, I see. It makes it that much harder for the hackers to get in, even if they manage to get your password.
Exactly. It's like having 2 locks on your door instead of just one.
Yeah, that makes sense. But to be honest, sometimes it feels like a hassle. Is the extra security really worth all the trouble?
It's a trade-off for sure. But think about it this way. Would you rather spend an extra minute or two logging in, or risk having your bank account emptied, or your identity stolen, or your personal information all over the internet?
Yeah, okay. I see your point. Okay, so we've covered strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, being cautious about phishing scams. What else can we do to protect ourselves online?
Back up your important data regularly. That way, if you do get attacked, you won't lose everything. And don't hesitate to report any suspicious activity. If you think you've been targeted, tell the authorities. The more we report these incidents, the better equipped we'll be to fight back.
So we can take steps to protect ourselves, but it still feels like a much bigger problem. I mean, if the US Treasury, with all its resources and security experts, can be hacked, what does that say about the state of cybersecurity overall? Are we fighting a losing battle?
It's a valid concern. It really shows that we need a fundamental change in how we approach cybersecurity. It can't just be about cleaning up after attacks happen. We need to be more proactive and strategic.
So how do we do that? How do we become more proactive?
It starts with investing in education and awareness. We need to make cybersecurity awareness a part of everyday life. We need to make it common sense. It needs to start in schools, in workplaces, everywhere, really. People need to understand the risks and know how to protect themselves.
Right. Because knowledge really is power. The more we know, the less likely we are to fall victim to these attacks. But what about the technical side of things? Are we just going to be constantly playing catch-up with the hackers?
We absolutely need to invest more in research and development. We need to find new technologies and approaches to security and think about how to build more resilient systems. And importantly, we need to anticipate new threats and figure out how to respond quickly and effectively when attacks do occur.
So it's not just about building higher walls. It's about making them smarter.
Exactly. Walls that can adapt and evolve. And it goes beyond just the technical aspects. It's about people, about processes, about the culture of security. We need a cybersecurity mindset woven into every level of an organization, from the CEO down to the newest employee.
So we need to be smarter, more proactive, more collaborative. But that sounds like a huge task. Where do we even begin?
It may seem daunting, but it's not impossible. We can start by demanding more from the companies and organizations we interact with every day. Ask them about their cybersecurity practices, hold them accountable for data breaches, and push them to prioritize security.
That's a great point. We have a lot of power as consumers and citizens. We can vote with our wallets and support companies that prioritize security. And we can hold accountable those that don't. It's like anything else. If we demand better, we're more likely to get it.
Absolutely. And it's not just about demanding better, it's about working together. We have to work together to create a more secure digital ecosystem, share information, collaborate on solutions, pool resources, and build a stronger collective defense.
So it's not just us versus them. It's about all of us working together to make the online world safer for everyone.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility. And although the threats are real and always changing, so are the solutions. We have the knowledge, the technology, and we can do this if we work together. We can create a more secure digital future. We just have to shift our thinking and move away from complacency towards a culture of cybersecurity awareness and action.
I like that. It's a powerful message. But before we get carried away with all the optimism, let's go back to the Treasury hack for a minute. One thing that really stood out to me was how they said classified information was protected during the breach. How is that even possible? I mean, if they can hack into the Treasury, can they hack into anything?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of how governments and intelligence agencies keep their most sensitive information safe. Think of it as layers of security, like a vault within a vault, designed to prevent any unauthorized access.
So strong passwords aren't enough.
No. Classified information is usually kept on separate, incredibly secure networks that are physically isolated from unclassified systems. Access to these networks is very tightly controlled, with multiple levels of authentication and clearance. They use advanced encryption, intrusion detection systems, and constant monitoring to detect and prevent any suspicious activity.
So it's a fortress, but even fortresses can be breached.
Of course, no system is perfect. But these multiple layers of security make it much harder to compromise classified information. The goal is to make the cost of an attack outweigh any potential benefit. Make it so difficult, so time-consuming, and so risky that attackers won't even try.
So it's like a high-stakes game of chess, always thinking ahead and building defenses.
It is. But we also have to acknowledge that perfect security doesn't exist. We have to be ready for breaches and have solid plans in place to limit the damage and recover quickly.
So even with all these safeguards, there's still risk. And that brings us back to that idea of a cybersecurity mindset. We always have to be vigilant, proactive, and informed, even when we're dealing with systems that seem totally secure. But this conversation has gotten pretty heavy. Maybe let's switch gears for a bit, and when we come back, explore what this breach means for the future of cybersecurity. Welcome back, everybody. So we've been talking about the hacking of Janet Yellen's computer. And one of the things that stood out to me is even with all these security measures around classified data, there are still weaknesses that we all need to worry about.
You got it. And I think this incident really brings to light a bigger question. What does the future of cybersecurity look like?
Right. Looking ahead now, we've talked about the steps we can take as individuals. But bigger picture, what changes? What are the long-term effects of all this? Does this change how we approach cybersecurity going forward?
I think it has to. This Treasury breach is like a wake-up call, not just for governments, but for everybody. Businesses, organizations, people like you and me. We can't just sit back and assume we're safe, especially not with technology moving as fast as it is.
So what needs to happen? What's the first step? Where do we even start?
I think one of the most important things is education. We've got to make cybersecurity awareness part of our daily lives. It can't be something only tech people think about.
Right. So it's like cybersecurity needs to be as basic as looking both ways before you cross the street.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about individual awareness. We need to push for stronger security practices everywhere. We have to hold companies accountable when data breaches happen and demand transparency. We need to know how our data is being used and how it's being protected.
That's a good point. As consumers, we do have power. We can support companies that take security seriously.
Exactly. And on a bigger global scale, there needs to be better cooperation between governments, industry leaders, and cybersecurity experts. This isn't a problem any one country can handle on its own.
Because cybercriminals, they don't exactly care about borders, do they?
Nope, not at all. Information flows freely across the internet, which means threats do too. If we want to develop common standards and be able to respond quickly, we need international cooperation.
It makes sense, but is that even realistic? Getting everybody to agree on something as complicated as cybersecurity, that seems optimistic at best.
It's a challenge, for sure. But just think about what happens if we don't. Cyber attacks could become so frequent, so destructive, that they cripple critical infrastructure. Imagine disruptions to global trade, or the loss of trust in the institutions we rely on. That's what we're trying to avoid.
So the stakes are really high. Okay, let's change gears a bit. We've been focusing on all the negative stuff, but technology itself isn't bad, right?
Of course not. It's a tool, and it can be a powerful force for good.
Right. Technology brings us together. It helps us learn. It entertains us. It solves problems. It fuels innovation.
All of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't ignore the potential downsides. It's about finding a balance, embracing what technology can do, but understanding the risks.
So what does that future look like? We've talked about stronger security, better education, more global cooperation. What's the best case scenario?
Imagine a world where cybersecurity is just built into our digital lives, like seamlessly. We have digital identities that protect our privacy. Systems designed with security as a top priority. And when threats do pop up, we can respond quickly because of global collaboration.
Sounds like a utopia, but a good one to aim for. So as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from this conversation?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that cybersecurity isn't just a tech issue. It's a human issue. It affects us all. And we all have a role to play in making the digital world more secure. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. And don't be afraid to demand better from the companies that hold your data.
That's a great point. Well, folks, we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the nuts and bolts of how this Treasury hack happened to what it means for the future. But it really comes down to awareness, taking action, and working together to create a safer online world for everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.